Welcome back to CIA Declassified. To understand the era of JGHAWK, you must visualize a world on the brink. By the early 1960s, the People's Republic of China was no longer just a regional power. It was a burgeoning nuclear threat. The United States had no eyes on the ground. Diplomatic relations were non-existent. The only way to know if Mao Zedong was building the bomb was to go over the top. Flying at 70,000 feet isn't just flying, it's a battle for survival. The atmosphere is so thin that the difference between the aircraft's maximum speed and its stall speed, known as the coffin corner, is as little as 5 knots. A single wrong twitch of the controls meant the wings could snap off or the engine could flame out, leaving the pilot a sitting duck for the Chinese SA-2 surface-to-air missiles. These pilots wore pressurized suits, essentially primitive spacesuits, and breathed pure oxygen for hours before takeoff to prevent the bends. They took off from Taoyuan Air Base. Taoyuan Air Base, which is Taoyuan. It is Taoyuan. Under the cover of darkness, crossing the Taiwan Strait and disappearing into the vast hostile airspace of mainland China. Below them, a nation was feverishly working on its first atomic weapon. Above them, the stars were visible even in the middle of the day. The project got its name through the CIA's alphanumeric cryptonym system. The JG digraph was the geographic indicator of Taiwan-based operations, while the Hawk served as the project's specific identifier, a nod to the predatory, high-soaring nature of the aircraft used. It was a partnership of necessity. The U.S. provided the planes and the Republic of China, specifically the 35th Black Cat Squadron, provided the pilots. This gave the American government plausible deniability while allowing the nationalist Chinese to keep tabs on the mainland they had lost a decade prior. Forget the ground level noise, we're diving into the hard-coded data of the high-altitude hunt. JGHAWK missions provided the first photographic evidence of the Chinese nuclear facility at Lop Nor. Between 1961 and 1974, the Black Cat Squadron flew 102 operational missions over the mainland. The program lost 5 U-2 aircraft to Chinese surface-to-air missiles. Records show the CIA developed specialized electronic warfare pods for the U-2s specifically to jam Chinese radar frequencies. The U-2 was so sensitive that pilots were forbidden from wearing any personal items to avoid identification. JGHAWK cameras could resolve objects as small as a newspaper on the ground from 13 miles up. Documentation confirms the CIA used weather research as the official cover story for the air-based crafts. The aircraft utilized a fuel known as JP7, designed not to evaporate at extreme altitudes. Pilots used a suicide pill containing cyanide hidden in the cockpit as a last resort. The program identified the exact date of China's first nuclear test, Project 596. Black Cat pilots were trained at Area 51 in Nevada under extreme secrecy. The U-2 wings were so long that the aircraft required chase cars to catch the wings during landing. Records show that the mission monitored the development of the D-42 ballistic missile. The CIA provided the pilots with escape and evasion kits containing gold coins for bribes. Technical logs verified the use of the System 9 electronic countermeasure suite. The program mapped the entire Chinese railway network to track the movement of fissile materials. Pilots were restricted to a high-protein, low-residue diet of steak and eggs before flights. The U-2 used a bicycle landing gear configuration to save weight for high-altitude lift. Documentation confirms that missions were scrubbed if cloud cover exceeded 25%. The project detected the secret construction of the Lanzhou gaseous diffusion plant. Pilots flew missions lasting up to 9 hours in a cramped, unheated cockpit. The CIA utilized a blue line secure teletype to transmit JGHAWK data to the White House. Missions photographed the Shuangchengzi missile test range Shuangchengzi. You have to understand, everybody, I don't speak Mandarin, and there are words, in Mandarin, a word can have like 4 different meanings just based on the tone you use. So I'm going to spell it out going forward if I don't feel confident about the pronunciation. The U-2 lacked an armed ejection seat in early versions to maximize altitude ceiling. Records verify the use of infrared film to detect heat signatures from underground bunkers. The program identified the deployment of Soviet-made MiG-21 interceptors. Pilots carried pH indicator strips to monitor their own oxygen saturation. The aircraft used a flamed-out landing technique to conserve fuel on the return leg. Documentation shows the CIA shared JGHAWK imagery with the British Mi-6. The program discovered the Chinese development of the H-6 strategic bomber. Pilots were required to maintain radio silence from takeoff until crossing back into friendly airspace. Technical audits show the cameras used a folding mirror system to fit the massive focal length into the fuselage. The program tracked the fallout of the 1967 Chinese hydrogen bomb test. Records confirm the use of Operation Sea Dragon as a maritime rescue backup for downed pilots. The program utilized the Model B high-resolution panoramic lens. Pilot Chun Hui Sheng, Chen, which isn't Chen, it is Chun. Hui Sheng, Huai-Sheng, was the first black cat pilot killed in action over the mainland. The program identified the expansion of the Chinese submarine fleet at Qingdao. Technical files show the U-2 wings were designed to flex up to 6 feet at the tips during turbulence. The CIA commissioned custom tube food such as liquid chocolate and beef for pilots to consume through their helmets. Records show JGHAWK utilized specialized sun tracking sensors to maintain precise navigation over the trackless Gobi Desert. The project employed a team of photo interpreters who worked 24-hour shifts at the National Photographic Interpretation Center. Declassified logs confirm that U-2 engines required a manual restart if they flamed out above 65,000 feet. The program monitored the internal unrest during the Cultural Revolution to assess military readiness. Pilots used specialized drift sites to manually correct for high-altitude jet streams that could push them off course. Records verify that the U-2 tail surfaces were actually made of thin aluminum skins that were prone to oil canning in extreme cold. A quote from Richard Bissell, the CIA Deputy Director for Plans: "The U-2 was the only way to penetrate the wall of secrecy Mao had built around his nuclear program." A quote from a Black Cat Squadron pilot whose name is written as HUA space HSICHUN. "We were flying on a razor's edge. At that altitude, the sky is black and the silence is absolute until the radar warning receiver starts screaming." A quote from a declassified CIA operational briefing dated 1963: "To see the enemy's secrets from 70,000 feet is to possess the ultimate high ground in the game of nations." A quote from Kelly Johnson, the lead U-2 designer: "The Black Cat pilots were the most undervalued assets of the entire Cold War, flying into the teeth of the SAMs every single week." Quote from a declassified State Department liaison memo: "Every mission was a gamble with a world-ending jackpot if we were caught in a way we couldn't deny." End quote. The declassified history of JGHAWK contains massive gaps, specifically in the special payload section of the 1964 logs. These pages are buried under FOIA exemptions B1 and B3. Exemption B1 refers to information classified to protect national security or foreign policy, while B3 shields information specifically protected by other statutes. In this case, the National Security Act of 1947, which protects intelligence sources and methods. What does this likely mean? These redactions almost certainly hide a failed attempt to airdrop sensor pods directly into the Lop Nor facility, a mission that would have involved American personnel on the ground in China years before Nixon's visit. My theory is that the CIA was attempting to deploy automated seismic and acoustic sensors designed to listen to the underground nuclear detonations. If the Chinese had discovered American-made sensors inside their most sensitive military zone, it would have been an act of war. The redactions hide the tactical failure of these ground sensor insertion missions, which were far more provocative than mere overflights. Again, just a theory. And on that note, in the thin air of 70,000 feet, the truth does become a bit distorted. So here's some other conspiracies. The secret space race. Some speculate that JGHAWK was used to track unidentified flying objects over the Gobi Desert, suggesting that the Chinese were recovering non-terrestrial technology at the same time as the US, and that the U-2 was the only platform high enough to track these high-velocity craft without being intercepted. The speculation is bolstered by the odd, erratic flight paths recorded in certain 1966 logs that seem to follow targets that were not stationary military bases. Then there's the sabotage hypothesis. This is a theory that one of the lost U-2s was actually brought down by remote overload, a secret CIA backdoor that destroyed the aircraft from the ground to prevent the pilot from defecting to the mainland with the latest camera technology. This theory claims the agency preferred a dead pilot and a destroyed airframe over the risk of the Soviet-designed Chinese radar teams getting a close look at the U-2's electronic warfare suite, effectively treating the pilot as a secondary component to the machine. Then there's the Mao-Nixon shadow deal. Speculation exists that the end of the JGHAWK program was a secret precondition for Nixon's 1972 visit, and that the U.S. actually handed over the flight logs of the Black Cat Squadron to Beijing as a gesture of good faith. Proponents of this theory argue that the sudden deactivation of the squadron in 1974 was the final payment in a multi-year geopolitical bargain that sacrificed the pilot's safety for a diplomatic breakthrough, leaving the survivors of the program feeling betrayed by their American handlers. And lastly, there is the ghost pilot theory. Some whisper that several JGHAWK missions were actually flown by fully automated systems of brain-machine interfaces that were decades ahead of their time, explaining why some pilots reported lapses in time during the long flights. This theory posits that the CIA was experimenting with early AI flight controls to bypass the physical limitations of human pilots in the coffin corner, potentially using the Black Cat pilots as mere biological backups for an experimental computer. Was JGHAWK a success? Tactically, it was a high-priced victory. While the loss of 5 aircraft and their pilots was a heavy blow to the Republic of China, the intelligence gained was irreplaceable. Tactically, the program proved that high-altitude reconnaissance could survive in contested airspace if the technology stayed one step ahead of the missiles. However, the high loss rate eventually showed the limits of manned flight against evolving SAM technology, forcing the transition to unmanned and satellite-based systems. Every lost pilot was a tactical failure of the invisible doctrine, yet every successful frame of film was a tactical masterpiece that mapped an entire empire's secrets. Strategically, it was a paradigm-shifting triumph. The CIA successfully monitored China's entry into the nuclear club, allowing the U.S. to adjust its global strategy and avoid a catastrophic misunderstanding. Strategically, it prevented a surprise nuclear breakout in the East, providing the early warning necessary to maintain a global balance of power. It allowed the United States to negotiate from a position of perfect information, knowing exactly where China's strengths and weaknesses lay during a decade of immense volatility. Without JGHAWK, the U.S. would have been blind to the Sino-Soviet split, missing the greatest strategic opportunity of the Cold War. As far as operational and technological breakthroughs go, wet film, high-resolution optics, and panoramic imaging. The development of the Hikon B camera allowed for unprecedented detail from extreme altitudes using a swinging lens to capture horizon-to-horizon imagery. Current use: the stabilization and lens grinding techniques developed for JGHAWK are the direct ancestors of the optics used in the Hubble Space Telescope and modern keyhole spy satellites. Today, the military uses these stabilized high focal length optics in the global JGHAWK drones to conduct persistent surveillance over modern conflict zones, allowing commanders to see the brand of a soldier's rifle from miles away. Radar cross-section reduction and signature management. Engineers experimented with ferrite paint and wire mesh internal structures to make the U-2 harder to detect by Chinese radar systems. These early experiments in signature management are the foundational principles of modern stealth technology found in the F-22 and the B-21 Raider. The intelligence community now applies these concepts to low observable drones that penetrate denied airspace in the Middle East and Asia, using the same radar absorbent material logic first tested on the wings of the Dragon Lady. Physiological life support systems and pressure suits. The full pressure suits used by U-2 pilots were the most advanced in the world, maintaining a pressurized cocoon around the body. This technology was directly handed over to NASA and became the basis for the Apollo moon suits and the current EMU suits used for spacewalks. In the modern military, these systems have evolved into the life support gear for the F-35 pilots, where oxygen enrichment and pressure regulation are automated to prevent G-force blackouts and high-altitude hypoxia. Electronic intelligence correlation and signal masking. JGHAWK perfected the art of matching photographic evidence with intercepted radio and radar signals to find the blind spots in a nation's defense. This multi-intelligence approach is the core of modern NSA operations. Today, the military uses sensor fusion on the battlefield to automatically overlay satellite imagery with radio frequency emissions, allowing a pilot to see an enemy's radar location on their helmet-mounted display before the radar even knows they are there. This automated correlation is the direct legacy of the manual mapping done by the CIA analysts during the JGHAWK program. The Dragon's Eye eventually closed as satellite technology took over, but the bravery of the Black Cat Squadron and the ingenuity of the CIA's engineers changed the course of the Cold War. They proved that no wall, not even one made of air and altitude, is truly impenetrable. The program left behind a legacy of high-altitude defiance that redefined the boundaries of national sovereignty. Every mission flown by a U-2 over the mainland was a statement that the United States would not be blind regardless of the cost in lives or diplomatic capital. As we look back at the grainy black and white photos of Lop Nor, we aren't just looking at history, we are looking at the birth of the modern surveillance state. The operational breakthroughs of JGHAWK didn't just stay in the cockpit, they trickled down into every aspect of our lives. From the GPS in our phones to the weather satellites that predict our storms. The Shadow of the Dragon was the crucible where the agency learned that the best way to win a war was to see it coming years before the first shot was fired. This project established the vertical front, a domain where the laws of physics and the laws of nations clashed in the absolute silence of the stratosphere. The pilots who flew these missions knew that if they fell, they would fall alone. Yet they continued to climb into that black sky, driven by a mission that the world wasn't allowed to know. Their story is a reminder that the most significant events in history often happen in the places where the air is too thin to breathe, and the silence is the only witness to the truth. Thanks for listening. Keep your sensors tuned in your altitude high. Always verify your data. Protect your sources. And remember, the most profound truths are often the ones hiding in plain sight from the edge of the world. Join us next time as we examine JGHAWK, the soft power front, the mid-20th century. Beyond the missiles and the spies, the CIA discovered a new battlefield, the heart and minds of the world's elite. We'll uncover the sophisticated manipulation of JGHAWK, the secret project that turned cultural festivals, international sports, and high art exhibitions into hunting grounds for intelligence recruitment. It's a story of cultural infiltration and social engineering in the most unlikely of places. Join us next time for The Velvet Trap. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.